All right, good morning, everybody. I want to start with the documentary hypothesis. That is, how was the major first part of the Old Testament / Hebrew Bible put together? We're talking about Genesis through 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. Some things we need to think about. Let me read to you a passage about scholars and Hebrew scriptures. Modern scholars of Israel religion have become more circumspect in how they use the Old Testament, not least because many have concluded that the Bible is not a reliable witness to the religion of ancient Israel and Judah. In fact, it represents instead the beliefs of only a small segment of the ancient Israelite community centered in Jerusalem and devoted to the exclusive worship of the God Yahweh. Let me point out, when we get to the formation of the New Testament, the same could be said of the New Testament as well. It is representative only of a small segment of Christianity, especially as it existed in the first 4 or 5 centuries. That may come as a big surprise to you, but when we get on to Karen Armstrong, you're going to see this whole idea of a small group saying this is it continues. Now, to kind of help us out, to remind us of what we mean by a small group versus the larger group, let's remind ourselves and refresh ourselves. 3 groups got left behind. In 722, when Assyria came in and wiped out the northern kingdom of Israel and deported 20-some thousand people east into what's now Mosul, some people were left behind. They adapted and adopted. They had feelings. They had ideas about religion, ideas of what they believed and didn't believe, and they wrote. But they were nicely censored and left out. My own opinion, bad, bad, bad. We needed to hear from them. In 586, with the second collapse of Jerusalem and the entire destruction of the temple and Jerusalem itself, another group were deported to Babylon, and others were left behind. Another group was left behind. And they did the best they could. They were poor, they were peasants, but they had feelings, they had ideas, and some of their stuff was not written down, but it was done in folklore and song. Now, let me also point out that one of the things that you and I do unconsciously is we assume that things that are written down are better than things that are expressed orally. In the new book, Origin, by Jennifer Raff, she says that now they're coming up with origins of how the Americas were populated, and they don't match the writings that Anglos came up with all, but guess what they do match? Ancient tribal lore. And she says what we have done in our Anglo-Saxon Teutonic Northern European thing is we doubt anything that's said orally as just a bunch of BS and, not really worthy. And we trusted the written word over the spoken word. She said that has turned out to be a bad mistake because in fact, in many Native American tribes, their oral history was correct in the way things were remembered. Well, I was reading that. It was like a bucket of cold water on me because I was one of the ones who didn't pay attention to oral stories either. And then she gave all these examples, and I said, see, Kenneth, that's a classic example of how limited we all are. You're supposed to be knowledgeable about this stuff. And I thought, look at that. You didn't get this either. So there were oral stories kept alive, and they get censored. And when Ezra and Nehemiah come back, they make fun of, they challenge. Same thing. Africans in the African diaspora have a history as well, especially when you go to the islands and listen to their histories. So you get people that Ezra and Nehemiah come back, they have an agenda, and if you don't agree with your agenda, you have to divorce your wife or your husband, you have to do this, get rid of your kids, you have to, like, what was this arrogance? They got left behind. And then finally, here's another group that got left behind. A small group left Babylon, leaving thousands and thousands and thousands in Babylon. This small group with Ezra and Nehemiah come in with a new agenda, and they said theirs is the correct, right way to do religion. Now, by the way, you have the same problem in Christianity as it evolves into the 3rd and 4th century. The same thing. So there is this continuing theme of small groups that insist that their way is the right way and discount, especially as we're looking here, people who've been left behind, who have emotions, feelings, thoughts, and by gosh, they adapted. They adapted and they survived, and we ought to honor that. We ought to honor that. And, you know, this censorious, we have the correct way gets carried on in every religion. It's not just the Hebrew religion in early Christianity. We get that today. You know that as well as I do. Some of the other issues that come up, not only are the people left behind, let's not forget the Moses story. Not only is the Moses story filled with holes, but here's a couple of things I bet you wouldn't remember. Moses had 2 sons. He had 2 sons. They're named. Why is it we never hear from them? Why? Because their histories were censored by the Orthodox because they were not considered real. I find this fascinating. Real Hebrews at all, because their mother was what? A pagan. Let's remember, Moses' first wife was Zipporah, and her father was what? The high priest of Midian. He was called Jethro or Ruel. His daughter was Zipporah, and that was Moses' first wife. They had 2 kids, 2 boys. They disappeared. Why? See, it's interesting when you say we take the Bible, we follow it seriously, but there are all these holes. Interestingly enough, the whole question of circumcision arises, but who circumcised Moses? He wasn't circumcised as a baby. His wife circumcised him. And who was his wife? A pagan. And who was she the daughter of? The high priest of Midian. Yeah, you don't get any of this. And who was Moses' second wife? Does anybody know who Moses' second wife was? See, it's interesting how you get the Orthodox approach and all these things get the sin of omission. Let me read to you about Moses' second wife. While they were at Hazeroth, Miriam and Aaron, Moses' supposed sister and brother, spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. For he indeed married a Cushite woman. Cush, everybody, is ancient Ethiopia, which means he married a black woman. Yes, we never hear about that, do we, folks? We don't hear about that at all. So I'm saying it's interesting, while we're getting all this is the way things are, there are all these holes all over the place. And let us never forget, if you can, Moses' Pharaoh's daughter bathing in the Nile. Good heavens. All right. I've got some other goodies too to tell you why ancient Israeli history is not really covered here. You've got the book of the prophet Isaiah. This is a classic example. We don't know what her name was, Daniel. They never tell us the Cushite woman's name, interestingly enough. Again, the sin of omission. They give us lots of other names, but not her name. The book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, is 66 chapters long. Now, I hope you appreciate this. Chapters 1 through 39 were written when Isaiah of Jerusalem wrote, but in this huge 66 chapters is the mention of Cyrus of Persia. In chapters 1 through 39, listen to this, the only empire was Assyria. Babylon hadn't existed. Persia hadn't existed. So when chapters 1 through 39 were written, Assyria was alive and well. It will be destroyed by the Babylonians, who will be destroyed by the Persians. Yet we get Cyrus of Persia written in 520, letting the exiles return. How do you possibly get somebody claiming this book is all one unified book when you've skipped a couple of hundred years, several hundred kings, and a couple of dynasties and empires? So how did this get put together? The original theory came from the Germans in the 19th century, and the United States scholars in Israel still hold to this. Most others do not. The idea was there were 4 basic editors, editorial groups, who, and nobody agrees when this happened, they were finally clumped together by editors or an editorial group, and we're not sure when. No, not at all. Nope, 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 nope. Not the German Jesuits. They were not involved in this at all, Maureen. This is all Protestant and Jews. All Protestants and Jews. The Catholics were not involved in this. Okay, so the first one, oh, here's Michelle right here. Michelle has joined us today. Remember, you'll see her tomorrow, everybody. Okay, now here we go. The idea was J. J is that editor who presents Yahweh. Yah, you pronounce it Yah with a J for German, Jah, Yahweh. The idea that this editor presents God as knowable, one you can talk to face as a friend. And you're going to see this in the story of the Garden of Eden. What happens in the Garden of Eden? Adam and God argue. God speaks to Moses face to face as a friend. Reading to you that passage from the Cushite woman, let me read you an example of Jay's writing that gets thrown out here. I just lost it. Let me pull it up again. Come on, Kenneth. Faster, faster, faster. I shouldn't have closed it so quick. All right, let me read to you this. Ready? Okay, so here's Aaron and Miriam talking about Moses. They spoke against Moses because the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he indeed married a Cushite woman, and they said, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? Yes, his sister and brother now are jealous and saying they have the right to speak as God spoke too. Then God gets mad at all of them and calls them into a meeting in the tent of meeting. And God says, I make myself known to others in visions. I speak to them in dreams. Not so with my servant Moses, who he is entrusted with all my house. With him I speak face to face clearly. The editor J has God speaking face to face in anthropomorphic ways. E is that group that refers to God as Elohim. J is traditionally said from the southern kingdom of Judah. E is from the northern kingdom of Israel. P, you know P, the priestly group, and D, the Deuteronomic group, J, E, D, and P. Well, it turns out as we dig more things up and become aware of voice inflections, remember that's a big deal, voice inflections, place words and names, we learned how to date things. Now, let me tell you what I mean, place words and names. When I talked about the book of the prophet Isaiah would be 66 chapters. What are you going to do with chapters 1 through 39, which use Hebrew, an old form of it that dates back to about 2,700 years ago, 700 BCE? Well, what are you going to do suddenly when you find in the same book Babylonian words? Hello, Babylonian words. Babylon didn't exist then. What are you going to do when you find Persian place words? Persia didn't exist then. What are you going to do when you find Aramaic in this book? Aramaic wasn't spoken for a couple of hundred years when Isaiah of Jerusalem existed. So when you start looking at, bingo, Aramaic, Persian, Babylonian, all these kinds of place words, you have to say, where do they come from? Obviously, one writer could not have guessed there were going to be multiple empires, multiple place words and languages that didn't exist when they wrote this. So looking at all of that and more that they've come up, here are the new ideas. Forget J and E as being from the 900s and 800s BCE. The modern scholars have come to accept there is a bunch of fragments that exist, as well as D and as well as P. The Deuteronomic idea that there's God, one law. If you don't do it our way, you're not do what was pleasing in the sight of the Lord. Remember, we read that last week. Those words, he did not do what was pleasing in the sight of the Lord. He did not do what the Lord required. I mentioned last week that Manasseh had a 50-year successful reign in the little kingdom of Judah. It was peaceful, free trade. He set up in the temple Assyrian gods, did Assyrian things, traded with Assyrian everybody. It was peaceful. writing several hundred years later in exile, the writer said, he did what was evil in the sight of God. We're here because he displeased God. God punished us for his 50 years. I thought, if God is that good, why didn't God remove him himself? Better yet, if God knows what's going on, why did God even have Manasseh born? Hello, if God's in charge, do something then, because whatever you're doing isn't working. I mean, just common sense. So you're getting then this group in exile that's angry and said, we're here because we did not do what we think God wanted us to do. The priests are mad because they think we haven't followed the right rituals, and they're competing narratives in Babylon. So the new argument is, you've got all these fragments, you've got a priestly group, a Deuteronomic group, and somebody someplace at some time over a period of time will edit this along with all the other writings and finally come up with what we call the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. Are you ready for this? Nobody is sure when that happened. There is no agreement whatsoever in modern scholarship who or when specifically the text was closed. We don't know. We simply don't know.
But what's the best estimation?
I just had it here. I'll tell you. Okay. The modern scholars say the authoritative form of the Hebrew Bible from Rabbinic Judaism is the Masoretic text, 7th to the 10th century. That's from the actual text itself that finally was agreed upon. But the actual books in the Bible could be anywhere from 100 BCE to 300 CE, a 400 stretch. And there is no one group that is identified, no one rabbi that's identified. There is no date upon which anybody agrees at all. And in fact, I told you before, nobody knows how Ecclesiastes made it into the Bible. Let me remind everybody the famous verse from Ecclesiastes: the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor riches to the wise and intelligent, but time and chance happen to them all. Or here's the other one. What about Job? Remember, the newest way of looking at Job is Job did not bow down before God, but said, I feel sorry for any of you who buy this. Whoa. Job is never answered. Remember that? All you did is get God yelling. Remember we did Job 2 summers ago? Job said, why did this happen? God appears to Job in a whirlwind and says, who are you? I did this, I did that. And you're thinking, okay, dude, you did all that. Answer the question. Why does this? I never answered it. Who are you to question me? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the world and the pillars of this? And Job is thinking, okay, I'm glad you did all that. You're mighty and powerful. Why did the good suffer? Never gets answered. How did those make those in? How did we get the story of David with premeditated murder with Uriah the Hittite? It's all there. It's laid out in black and white. How did we get that? Here's one for you. Let me share the screen. You're going to love this because this is what we did this past week. We're going over text and context in my class. Okay, now let me just share with you what we did in my class. I think you guys might like to see what I do now. I know that Bobby Vance saw this. This is what I do in my class. This is what I do in the classroom. This is an introduction to text and context. This world religion class is not just about supporting you in your own prejudice and points of view. This world religion class is about exposing you and introducing you to all kinds of information. It's what we do in college. Why? So you can make informed choices with what helps you navigate your life when looking at, in this case, religious text. Everybody follow me so far? Okay, in this class, we see religious texts can and may have multiple meanings, multiple interpretations, multiple voice inflections, and the original meaning may be lost. The it is written issue. Do you take a text literally or not? And finally, the text the context of the text can make all the difference of how the text is accepted. A text taken out of context or given only one interpretation can lead to much hurt and pain and bad choices for many. I hope you like all that, everybody. Okay, now I gave an example of this. I went on, we were talking about homosexuality, and we talked about this right here. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them shall have committed abomination. They shall be put to death. Their blood is upon them. And then I said, you need to know before we begin, if you believe in the God, how does your God behave? And my student said, oh, we hadn't thought about that. I said, if you're going to believe in a higher power, however you define that, how does your higher power behave? So then I said, you see this text, but what are you going to do with this? So I had my students, somebody would volunteer, and I said, read this. Somebody want to read this? Roy, go ahead and read this.
I am black and beautiful.
Oh, wrong one. Sorry. God, missed it. Where'd it go? Come on, right here. Here you go. Ready?
I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Greatly beloved were you to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women.
Yes, so I said to my students, this is David. He just heard that Saul, King Saul, and his son Jonathan had been slaughtered in a battle with the Philistines. And David, upon hearing the news of Jonathan's death, is quoted in 2 Samuel as saying, I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Greatly beloved were you to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. I said, what does that tell you, students? And I said, that totally contradicts what you just saw in Leviticus. And I said, somebody said, well, couldn't love be brotherly love? I said, the problem is the Hebrew word. The Hebrew word can be brotherly love, also sexual love. It can mean both. And it says passing the love of women. How are you going to handle that? And by the way, I reminded my students that emotional attachments can be stronger than physical attachments. You can never have sex with somebody, but be incredibly and powerfully in love emotionally, which is far stronger than necessarily a physical moment encounter. There we go. Whoa. Yes, that's true. I said, so look at that. Isn't it interesting when people are screaming about homosexuality, they never remember this. I've got some other gems to show you true. So when you take things out of context, and then of course, I hope you will enjoy this. We had to share this as well. To share you, we're talking about text and context, about how people assume the Bible has only one point of view that's very negative and judgmental. Roy, are you interested in reading some more? Okay, you guys are going to love this. Yes, we did this in class too. Go ahead.
Okay. Song of Solomon. How grateful are you for your feet in sandals, O Queen Maiden. Your rounded thighs are like...
Now, we'll not have this in the Bible. We'll not have this in the Bible. No. Go ahead.
Work of a master hand. Your navel is a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. Your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. You're moving it, I can't read one. Your eyes are pools in Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabim. Your nose is like a tower of Lebanon overlooking Damascus. Your head crowns you like a Carmel, and your flowing locks are like purple. A king is held captive in the tresses.
Now take a breath for the next few verses. Take a breath. Don't stop reading right through. Read this the way they're meant to be written. I don't want this, as the Lord God said. I want this read the way it's meant to be done. Go ahead.
How fair and pleasant you are, O loved one, delectable maiden. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I say I will climb the palm tree.
I say I will climb the palm tree. Hallelujah, I will climb the palm tree. The Lord be praised, the palm tree I will. Sorry about that.
Oh, may your breasts be like clusters of the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples, and your kisses like the best wine that goes down smoothly, gliding over lips and teeth. Okay,
why I share that is the following. I said to my students, you need to know that when you're given text and somebody says it is written, and they say this is the interpretation of that. Orthodox Judaism will say that is really an allegory about Yahweh and your love for Yahweh. Christians will say that is really an allegory and a metaphor for Christ and his church. And I said, that's toe interpretation. You can say it's a damn erotic love poem for heaven's sake. And my students said to me, do people really say the other? I said, yes, they really do. And they said, you can't be serious. Somebody said, this is an allegory between twice. So how do you get that? I said, that's an example of how you get multiple meanings. And if you don't know it, and somebody says to you and opens up a book and says a Quran or a Bible, said, this is it. It is written. I said, you need to wake up and realize there are multiple meanings, multiple words, and nobody has the final word. They may say they do, but they don't. Too many people get hurt when things are taken out of context, and you can see that. It is, in fact, if you go and do the work, it is an exact example of Babylonian and Egyptian erotic love poetry. And not only that, guess what, folks? Guess what? Are you ready? Are you ready for this? We talked about Moses and his second wife. Are you ready? You ready? Okay. I need somebody to read again. I need somebody to read. Okay, there he is. Roy?
Okay. You want me to read again?
Yep, right there.
Okay. I am black and beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has gazed on me. Yes,
that beautiful erotic love poem was written by a woman who is dark. Ha! How do you like that one? And Moses' second wife was black. Nobody ever told you that. Racist, where are you? Hallelujah, where are you? Nobody ever told you that. So I said, you need to know when somebody comes up and says, the Song of Solomon is in fact an allegory between Christ and his church. I said, maybe you ought to read it first and then tell me what you think, because your idea is just as valuable. Now I have to tell you what happened at the end of the class. Two students are sitting side by side, their boyfriend and girlfriend. And the guy says, before we end the class, I'm climbing the palm tree. And the girl says, no, you're not, and slap him upside the head. You need to know there are multiple meanings. And this is what I do with my classes. I try to empower them to look at things, read things, and just not take things for granted. Now, the modern way of looking at the Old Testament involves a Masoretic text. When it was translated from Hebrew to Greek, and the Samaritans. Remember the Samaritans? Let me tell you who the Samaritans are. Are you ready for this, everybody? Do you remember that group that I told you in 722 when Assyria came in and they wiped out the northern kingdom of Israel? Some were left behind. Ultimately, those who stayed and intermarried with those who came in will carry on an abbreviated form of the Israelite religion. And ultimately, they will become what became known as the Samaritans. And there is still a small community of Samaritans in Israel today. So things carry on. Their understanding of the Pentateuch is also one of the major sources we use today. Yeah. That's why I say we have to take what's left behind seriously. Now, I want to say something else too about looking at all the different groups. Basically, what you have then is a group in exile who comes back with an attitude about what rituals you should use, a group in exile who comes back with a set piece of theology, and they try to make everybody else agree with that. You need to know that Judaism has always been multifaceted, multidimensional, and you've always had lots of groups who did not go to or buy the official line. You need to know that. And a classic example of this, by the way, is I'll never forget when I was first in taking a course in the Hebrew Bible in seminary, and we were reading about the great cleansing of the temple. And it said, and I think it was Hezekiah or Josiah, cleansed the temple. Now, you ready for this? Ready for this? Of the cults of male prostitutes and female prostitutes. And I raised my hand and I said in class, wait a minute, whoa. What are male prostitutes doing in the temple? And the professor said, wake up, dude. That's exactly what he said. He said, read about all the fertility poles, read about all the high altars, Notice every time a new king comes in, they're going to tear down the high altars. They're going to get rid of the fertility poles, and they keep on cropping up again and again and again. And they found now, are you ready for this? A high altar with the name Yahweh and his consort, a female consort. Things are not the black and white you and I have been presented in Sunday school or wherever you went. Israel religion was multifaceted, multi-layered, and you need to know that. Originally, again, remember, originally, Israel, the root word was El, and it meant let El rule. Originally, Israel. Look at the number of people who are named Baal in the Hebrew Bible. And who are some of the great, so did women go to the male prostitutes? No. Didn't work that way. Didn't work that way now. Didn't work that way then. Sorry about that. And so, I just share with you, it is multi-layered, and it always has been. The line you and I have been given is nowhere near accurate. Now, another classic example is the tribe of Dan. I thought it was about us having as many babies as possible. Well, that is at the time of Abraham. We're now talking hundreds of years later. Maureen, when we're talking about Abraham and Lot, and we are talking about other times, we're talking about keeping the lineages pure. Okay. Now Leviticus is, I guess we could stretch that and say Leviticus. Now, Maureen, let me go back. Leviticus may have been saying that too during the Babylonian exile because they didn't want Jews in Babylon to intermarry, which they did. The reality is, and this is the way things happen, people get attracted to people. I'm sorry about that, but they do. Now, I'll give you a classic example. If you had told me 25 years ago, Kenneth, you're going to be attracted to and have actually the only successful real relationship you've ever had to a Colombian. And you're going to learn to eat differently over the years. And finally, as you get old, you're going to enjoy black beans and pasta and healthy food. And you're going to do it not because you have to, because you're going to gradually change the way you look at things. I would have told you you're nuts. So who do I wind up marrying? Somebody who is not of my background, not of my culture, not of anything that I have, and vice versa. And we've been together now. Our first date was in 23 years this April. It was a disaster, the first date. It was an absolute disaster. I told you about that before. It was horrible. It was a mess. Now, I'm just saying, so, people get attracted and they marry. They marry. And so that's the way it is. Sorry, folks, but that's the way it is. You look for an attraction, trust, respect, and humor. I don't know about you, but that's what I look for. Attraction, trust, absolute respect, and humor. And I remember when we got married, we went to the bank. And we said to the guy, both of our names go on all of our money. And the bank manager said, are you sure you want to do that? That's very unusual. And I said, why would we marry each other if we didn't trust each other? And trust means money as well. Now, maybe that sounds very bizarre, but if I'm going to marry somebody, I'm assuming I can trust them and vice versa. We were older, and if we didn't know what we were doing by then, it's never going to happen. And so that way, and it turns out to be a brilliant move, because that means if I die tomorrow, she's covered financially and vice versa. Everything is in both names, just for what it's worth. So people in Babylon, they may be Jewish, but they're going to intermarry. And that happens no matter where you are, no matter what group you are. Maria has 9 brothers and sisters. 1 brother passed away. Interestingly enough, the 3 girls, there are only 3 girls, all married Anglos. One is an Episcopalian, one's a Methodist, and one's a Unitarian. And I have to tell you a funny story about how this works. My brother, her brother Nando's mother-in-law, let's see if I can put this politically correctly because it's being recorded, was a force of nature. Does that work? So Christmas Eve, she is here from Colombia, And at 11:30 at night, she bangs on the table and said, "Stop everything. We must now do the Christmas novena." And my wife's sister, Maggie, says, "We're not doing any Christmas novena." And she says, "We are." She says, "We're not. We're now in the United States. We have Protestants in the family. We're not embarrassing anybody. We do things. We do not now mix religion in this family or politics in this family. The family comes first. If you want to do the novena, go to the damn garage or go into the guest room. Everybody else, we're not going to separate or divide the family because it gets along very well. No religion and no politics." Whereupon Nando very graciously said, "Come now, let us go over here." She was furious. The family adapted. They adapted because they realized that we are here and we're there, we're putting them together. And since we've added a Nicaraguan, we've added a couple of Cubans, and Lord knows what other riffraff we've added. And it's the way we work here. And that's the way life goes on. You marry people from different backgrounds, different ideas. Not everybody does, but a lot of people do. And that's just the way it is. And I just share that with you. And so when you get groups coming back and tell people that have survived, you've got to get rid of what you've done. It didn't go over well. And it never does. Okay, we did not get to the tribe of Dan. Let's push on just for a few minutes because I want us to really get to starting the Gospels next time because it's a mess. It continues the whole story. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop like there's a curtain that just comes down. This same thing about small groups want to tell everybody what they should believe doesn't stop. The idea there's disagreements doesn't stop. So it's a continuation. It's a continuum. I don't know. We got the idea that somehow, there's Judaism and there's Christianity, there's a break. Well, it doesn't work that way, folks. And I think you probably knew that down deep. Okay. The tribe of Dan, when they were digging things up, they found the tribe of Dan didn't have anything that looked Canaanite. It didn't have anything that looked Hebrew. Nothing at all. What it did have is the same stuff that the Philistines had. Ha! So originally, people knew the Philistines came probably from the Aegean area. It turns out in the 1200s and the 1300s BCE, all these great cultures collapsed for a variety of complex reasons. And it turns out the whole Mediterranean, including, by the way, and don't ask me how they got to the Balkans as well, it was a mess. The 1300s, the 14 BC, it was a mess, and part of it was weather. There were major tsunamis caused by earthquakes in the bottom of the Mediterranean. And that caused islands to be flooded. Again and again, cultures, the Mycenaean culture collapsed, other cultures collapsed. The Hittite culture was collapsing. It caused such a mess that people, the end of the Bronze Age, absolutely correct, Danny, the end of the Bronze Age. And what happened when people needed to go? There was some kind of, I forget what was going on in the Balkans. People went to the Aegean, bad place to move. They went from the frying pan into the fire, but they brought with them dress and artifacts. These groups on the island had to go to the mainland. What mainland was there? Egypt, Turkey, what we now call Turkey, and what we now call Syria, and what we now call Israel. Lovely. People were already there. So what? You get the Philistines arriving, and they settle on the coast. Tyre and Sidon, because they're ancient Phoenician, were able to repel all of this stuff. The Hittites were not. The Egyptians had to leave. But guess what? I don't bet you didn't know this, neither did I. The Egyptians did not themselves populate their holdings in what we now call Israel and Lebanon. They hired mercenaries. Yes, I didn't know that. They hired mercenaries. And guess where the mercenaries came from? The Aegean. All those people that were displaced, they hired them. The Philistines did too. The Philistines were traitors. They hired mercenaries to be their soldiers and outfitted them well. And so these mercenaries got hired, and it now shows that where Dan is, there was a kingdom that there's a whole bunch of things there. It said the tribe of Dan, one of the 12 Israelite tribes, may have not started as no such thing, though the idea is at odds with the biblical narrative. You get one of those fragments. Deborah in Judges says, and Dan, why did he stay with ships? Dan was apparently the only Israelite tribe that had ships. It was on the coast. All the rest of the tribes are deep inland. Didn't make sense. It turns out that this group was DNA-wise, thank God for DNA, is made up of the group of sea peoples who were Aegean in origin, attacked Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and all up and down the coast. They were part of the thundering collapse throughout the Middle Ages of the 12th centuries. As the Egyptians withdrew from Canaan, mercenaries remained, and it may very well be that they were given property as for their service to the Egyptians. So this group probably was north of the Philistines, but different ethnic background than the Philistines, and decided they aligned better with the people in Canaan. So what they did is basically voted to amalgamate with the people in Canaan. So you got the Philistines on the south. Above them are Tyre and Sidon, who are, by the way, still alive and well as we speak, as cities and cultures. And in between, you've got this tribe of Dan, which is Aegean, but not like the other Aegeans, and votes to amalgamate with the Canaanites. It has nothing in common with them culturally, except they like them and they got along better with them. Now, I know that does no sense, but that's what the archaeology is showing. All of the lists, yeah, right you go, Danny. Politics makes strange bedfellows. Here you go. I'm an Anglo. Do I get along with a lot of the fundamentalist Anglos in town? No. So what would I ally with? I ally with Reformed Jews, renegade Catholics, atheists, heretic Christians of different backgrounds. That's my alliance, not with the fundamentalist Anglo churches in town. Does that make sense to everybody? If you can see that, you can understand
Yes.
a group of Aegeans who's saying, I don't get along with these other people. I do better with the more mixed Canaanites. Makes perfectly good sense to me. Politics makes strange bedfellows. So that's why, again, you can't take the words literally. The tribe of Dan was not one of the 12 tribes of Israel as is presented. It's a group that's not quote unquote Canaanite. It's not a group of semi-nomads settling into the land from what we call Iraq. Nope. It's a group from the Aegean. Go figure. Pagans. Go figure. Don't you love it? What a mishmash. And that ultimately will be what we put together in Israel. By the way, Israel today is also a mishmash. Remember, 70% of Israel is, remember, that's secular. You go to the city of Tel Aviv, you would not know it is Jewish when you go and compare that with Jerusalem. Go take a look at the Orthodox sections of Jerusalem, and then take a short trip to Tel Aviv, and you're going to two entirely different worlds. I mean, it's like they're entirely different worlds. Very, very different worlds. And that's like it is in Miami too. Okay, yeah, we tend to forget that things are far more complex. That's why you should do your day. Carol Reiter, who some of you may remember, said, you know, with every, I love to quote this, with every birth certificate you should have that cannot be unattached, your DNA. Think about that. It cannot be ripped off. It is part of your birth certificate. There should be a flip over that has your DNA that lists all the tribes you come from. I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Yeah, Roy, I know you don't think of it as overwhelmingly secular, but in fact, 70% of the population identifies as being secular.
Yeah, I was just saying, no, I think of Israel as overwhelmingly secular. I think politically they try to ground themselves into Judaism to justify their their existence in that part of the world, because supposedly the Jews came out of that area. Although I'm very skeptical that the vast majority weren't actually converts.
Precisely. So again, a mishmash. Now you need to know this sets up a magnificent template for the Gospels. And the same thing happens all over again. And I don't think that should surprise anybody. So we're doing a continuum. It's not like we're dividing it. Well, we've got the Old Testament. It doesn't work that way. It's a continuum. So next class, if you would begin, I'm going to show you, by the way, déjà vu, something you may like. I'm going to show you the groups that formed after Jesus dies. These are before the Gospels are written, or as they're being composed. And you're going to see it all over again, just what we're talking about here. And it'll be quite a surprise. There are basically 10 or 11 groups that will form. These are all very small and very tiny, and they do not play well together at all. And this will set up for us the beginning before we start going into the chapter on the Gospels of Karen Armstrong's book. Okay, any questions? Any questions, anybody? If you have a chance, do see Michelle tomorrow. If you can. Want to say hello to Roy again, and Pat Busbus, and Barbara, and Doug in Munich, AJ in Wisconsin, Ron with the oligarchs, Karen Paul, who's midway through the semester, Pat Sullivan joined us face to face, Ray in Washington Heights, Maureen, Bobby Vance. Would you let us see that lovely wife of yours? Thank you. And we've got Danny Sorkin and Chris Diaz and Tony Lee from Miami Lakes. Good morning, Mrs. Bobby Vance. What is your first name again? I can't hear. Can you?
It's Carrie.
Carrie.
Yes.
All right, Maureen, I'm going to have
Nice to see you, Carrie.
Yes.
Hi, nice to see you all.
Carrie, you're going to learn. It'll take me 5 years before I get the names right.
It's okay.
Yeah, he'll task me with trying to find a mnemonic to remember you by. So I guess I've got to study that.
Ray, Roy, and Ron. It took me years to get Ray, Roy, and Ron right. I remember Ray one day said, "Will you get this right? I'm Ray. And yes. Come on, Kenneth. It's like if you said God appeared in front of you and say, "Do I know you? Who are you?" It's embarrassing. It really is embarrassing. All right, be safe and well. Some of you I see tomorrow. Be safe and well. And for those in Miami, remember we're getting a cyclone bomb today. It's going to go from the 80s to the 50s and then back up to the...
Hallelujah. We need one more day of winter. I feel we've been cheated.
I don't know that woman. I don't know that woman at all. Never met her before.
Are you getting like a storm, like heavy rain too with that temperature?
We're getting a heavy rain. We're getting rain that cools it off and then boom. Now, I don't know if over in rural Tampa, you're getting that. Tampa's very rural. You're getting the same thing?
We did. We're in the process of temperatures dropping right now.
Oh, no, it's a tramp.
We had our big thunderstorm, I think, already.
All right, then it's coming our way then.
Mhm.
Be safe and well, everybody. Some of you I see tomorrow. Be safe and well.
You too. Be safe and well.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Great class as always.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.